and welcome. Now, we don't have a name for this project yet, and we're open to suggestions, so let us know. This is going to be an MMA webcast/podcast that's not about what fighters say, not about how fighters feel, not about what fighters tweet, but what fighters do in the cage where it's supposed to count. I'm Jack Encarnacio, but that's not important. You know who's on the other side of the conversation. The all-time UFC performance bonus record holder, UFC lightweight madman Joe Lauzon. Joe, it's a privilege to be here with you and break down some of the latest cage happenings.
Yeah, so guys, the podcast, we're going to try to keep it pretty real. We're going to try and keep it pretty informal. I think that there's all kinds of times like when there's fights going on and, I'm tweeting things. And I think a lot of times people don't really understand exactly why certain things are happening. So we're hoping that, maybe once a week we're going to try and break down, we'll pick one or two fights, talk about what happened the night before, this weekend or whatever's happened in the news this week or whatever's going on. And, maybe give a little bit of insight, because Twitter is awesome. Social media stuff is great. You kind of get like bits and pieces, but you only get so much in 140 characters. So we're hoping to, break it down a little bit more in detail, a little more in depth, and just kind of, let people know kind of how a lot of fighters are seeing it. Yeah. We'll see how it goes. I think it'll be interesting. I think it'll be fun. And we're going to try and keep it not so much like we're doing like this big show. Obviously we'll have to do a little bit, but more so that like we're just talking, we're just talking about the fights like I would with like my buddies. So
absolutely. And we have we're very fortunate in that we have one of the larger brains in all of the sport to pick as fans. And this is a dynamic, by the way, where you're not talking to someone on this side of the conversation that really has ever rolled before or has ever trained before, and proud of it in an odd way because it allows me to, kind of access a different point of view, hopefully. But we've got a guy who not only has trained but has whipped substantial ass in the octagon. So there's plenty to learn from a guy who's been in just about every type of fight and seen just about every type of adversity in this great sport. And I think, Joe, we're going to talk first off the top about the Iaquinta Ross Pearson lightweight fight in your division in Sydney, Australia on Friday on UFC Fight Pass. And a fascinating win for Iaquinta, and of course a very important one as Pearson heavily favored going in. Most gave him the striking edge in terms of being, more three-dimensional in his attack and offering more, but we're learning that Iaquinta is progressing rapidly from fight to fight. I want to ask you what you saw in perhaps the first frame where two judges gave it to Iaquinta, one for Pearson, where Al was setting up what ultimately would be the fight-ending blow, that huge right straight off the blocked head kick.
It was a really good fight. I felt like, so going back even further, so let's not even talk about the fight yet. Let's go back. So I paid really close attention to Al because he was on The Ultimate Fighter with Joe Proctor, who was, obviously trains in my gym. One of my best training partners. I'm got ready for so many fights. And so obviously I watched every season, every episode, every second of the entire season because I'm trying to pay attention because Proctor might be fighting Al at some point. I don't know what's going on. So I'm paying really, really close attention. And Al's a guy that I've been impressed with. Al's a super good guy. He lost in the finale, so he didn't win the whole show, but I felt like he was probably one of the better guys in the entire show. So the guy definitely fought really closely. I fought Mike Chiesa in my last fight. Al was on the same card. Al fought Chiesa in the finale, and he's definitely a guy that I'm like wow, like Al's getting really, really good. Proctor's supposed to fight him at one point, so I pay really, really close attention. Anyone in my division because I might fight him, Proctor might fight him. All kinds of stuff might happen, and I'm always super impressed by Al. I think that just overall, so he's part of that Chris Weidman camp. Matt Serra, Ray Longo, Eric Heyer, really, really tough camp. Really kind of like Ray Longo's kind of thing is a lot of like the boxing and all that kind of stuff. Sarah's got the jiu-jitsu, so like Al's good everywhere. He's got good jiu-jitsu, he's got good wrestling, wrestled, he's got good hands. One of those guys that like I really enjoy watching because he's really fast, has great boxing movement. His feet are always under him. He's always ready to move. He's always ready to punch. Like I'm always really, really, really anxious. Not anxious. Really excited to kind of watch Al. Pearson, on the other hand, is kind of the complete opposite. Very, very good, but a lot of different things. Like I think Pearson he's like more like that Dutch kickboxer style, like kind of like weight in, big leg kicks, big power strikes, unforgiving shots. But when you get someone that's a little bit faster, it's really, really tough to get those off. So going into the fight, I thought that Al was gonna do very, very well. Obviously anyone can get hit at any time, but I felt like Al was going to do really, really well. And so like when I watched the fight, I kind of, it kind of went how I thought. Like I thought Al was doing great. Like I think that the announcers were talking a little bit about how, it's really tough around the call, but I thought it was all Al. I mean, so did you say that one judge gave it to Pearson? Is that so?
One judge did give it to Pearson, who let some leg kicks go, but I think for the most part was picked apart as, Iaquinta circled the perimeter, flicked kicks in at opportune moments, and really seemed faster to the punch. Now, whether it's a speed thing, I thought it was interesting. The announcers pointed out the difference in stance and the difference in footwork, and it really struck me. Iaquinta's moving around there like a boxer, fleet-footed, moving much more quickly and trying to develop angles. Pearson's marching forward, hands high, like a Dutch kickboxer.
Yep. I mean, and now who did you think won that first round?
I think Iaquinta won. I think he clearly got the better of the exchanges, and any credit you could give to Pearson for any blows landed, unless there's some magnitude of impact that's hard to appreciate not being there live in the arena. Just watching on television, it seemed like Iaquinta definitely was trump-carding him in most of the exchanges, which, considering the nature of the round, should have meant it was his round.
And a lot of times, you talk about like Dutch-style kickboxing, you're talking like, very much like, so here's how Muay Thai kick and Dutch kickboxing and all that stuff works, right? For the most part, I'm probably butchering it. I'm sure like purists are going to kill me, but for the most part, you have a kickboxing match. Whoever basically lands the last kick basically gets the point. So I kick you, you kick me. I don't return a kick. It's basically, you get credit for that. But if I kick you, you kick me, I kick you, and you don't return, then I get credit for that. And it kind of works like that. It's basically like a big pissing contest on who's going to kick the other person harder, or who's going to hit the other person harder, or whatever's going to happen, or last. So a lot of times, like, it's all about, being stable, being able to take that kick, absorb it, and fire it back. But when you get someone that's not interested in doing that, then when they want to hit you and then move, very, very different, So, Pearson's sitting there, he's ready to return on Al, who's out of the way. Boxer style is more like hit and move, hit and get out of there. And it just doesn't work out sometimes. And there's tons of guys that are, heavy Dutch kickboxer style that, they land like some of the worst, like head kick knockouts and all these other things. But there's a lot of times when they do get picked apart a little bit by a guy that's a little bit faster, a little bit lighter on his feet. And I think Al is great.
It begs the question: why take that Dutch style at all? It doesn't really seem like it. It doesn't seem like it pays dividends anymore in modern MMA to carry yourself that way, because, like you said, it isn't a pissing contest anymore. Guys are a bit too quick to get out of the way.
So it is a little bit slower, but it's still not slow. Obviously, you're talking about, someone that's just pure speed versus pure power. It's like you very, very rarely have someone that's just super fast that has no power versus someone that's super heavy-handed that's very, very slow. It's still, you're still trying to find that. But it's just that the Dutch style is a little bit more power-oriented as opposed to, a lot of, like, boxing is usually a little bit more speed-oriented.
I'm interested in one thing. I don't know if you have insight on this, but I remember when Travis Brown was about to fight Alistair Overeem last year in Boston, and all he could say in the pre-fight interviews when asked to describe Alistair Overeem's style is that it's Dutch. And he said it kind of with a smirk. And afterwards he said, what I meant by that is he's open right up the middle for a straight flick kick, which of course nailed Overeem square in the jaw after Travis Brown was on the ropes and in substantial peril. But he found that opening straight up the middle. And afterwards he talked about how that Dutch style does allow for strikes right up the middle. And I have to say, I saw Iaquinta throwing straight kicks much along the same lines. Is there something about that stance that opens you up for a straight kick up the middle like that, do you think?
Definitely a little bit, but for me, it's really, really tough to, to really judge someone based on what they say in the, in the post-fight interview. I fought Jamie Varner, and I hit like this awesome, I hit a sweep that we drilled a lot, and then I jumped into a triangle, and the triangle was something that it wasn't something I've been hitting a lot recently, but it was something I used to hit like years and years ago, and I could have been like, oh, you know what, we worked on this exact submission every single day, and then we hit it, and whatever, but that wasn't, and no one would know, unless you're in the gym with me, you don't know, so, it's always kind of tough to tell what people are taking credit for. People hate it when guys, after the fight start making excuses. They're like, oh, well, I got hit with this, or I got hit with that, or I had a bad training camp, or I had a fractured skull, or a broken neck, or all these other crazy things that people say after fights. But it goes the other way. It's like, when someone does something spectacular, amazing, maybe they did drill it a lot, and in most cases they probably did. But it could also be a lot of times when it's someone just stumbled, or like, oh, I tried to make that happen. It's like, no, it just kind of happened. So,
right, absolutely, yeah. No, there's, just as often as you want to deflect blame for something, you have to be equally as judicious about when you accept praise, except the someone saying that you deserve to do that or that you somehow set out to do that. You need to be equally, I think, judicious when you talk about your fights. But when it comes to Iaquinta's winning blow, Pearson had a fairly steady diet of kicks in the first round, but when it came down to it in the second, he tries to go upside Iaquinta's head. Iaquinta first puts the hand up, of course, to block the impact. And I wanted to talk to you about that because, what does that really accomplish? Because we've seen head kicks blast right through hands before and knock guys down, yet other times it seems to be like the perfect way to stop that kick from landing hard.
So a lot of that is all about the angle. Like if your hands are up, but your hand's kind of close, this doesn't really do you much good because your arm has there's no structure to it. It's not rigid. It's just your elbow's out, but your hand just hits you in the face, and that does you no good. But when if you have your hands up but you're out, now it hits it, and before it gets that 90-degree mark, you're pretty strong, and it kind of deflects and kind of stops it a little bit. But it's one of those things you want to get your hand up because even if you just take off a little bit, sometimes that's the difference. But there's definitely some times when if someone kicks really, really hard, it does you no good. So it's definitely it's you want to try to block it, but sometimes it's just not enough. Ideally, ideal situation, your arms are out, you're getting both arms out there, they're outside that 90-degree angle, and you stop the kick, you deflect it, you get it away. Sometimes though, you're not fast enough. It's just you get your hands up, but it's not enough, and it still comes through.
Yeah, I like that thought about the angle. Now, so Iaquinta deflects the kick, and then he answers very quickly, it appears, with a right straight. But I was watching it really closely, and I always like this part about fighting, or this part about striking, and I think it's often lost in the speed of a killer shot that people don't really notice its importance. But Iaquinta gets a hand out and kind of feels for the side of Pearson's head with his left before he throws the right. Quickly, he sort of reaches to get a sense of where his head is. Talk about why that's so important, to kind of feel where your opponent's head is before you throw the shot. We always see guys leading with their hands. People always wonder why. They talk about eye pokes and things like that, why it's necessary, and is it even above board to constantly be putting your hand out there to feel where a guy's forehead is. But that's vital to know where to throw the punch.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, a lot of it's, you're constantly putting your hand out as like a measuring stick. Like you're constantly trying to judge your distance and everything like that. So it's definitely more of a measuring stick than anything. A lot of times like guys jab and you'll jab when you're way out of range. Guys are out of range, you're jabbing, and you're still just not you're not really looking to do damage. You're just trying to find out where you are. A lot of people think that the jab is like the measuring stick, but when I'm just outside my jab range, that's when I can come through with it. I get a little bit more on my right hand. And you get a little bit more. So you're if you're just outside your jabbing range, you're perfect distance for a right hand. So that's why, and it's the same thing with kicking and things like that. Like you have to have some kind of measuring stick, and you can't just eyeball it sometimes when you're talking a very, very, difference between like, knocking someone out and being out of range is sometimes like, half an inch. So it's really, really tough to eyeball that and gauge that without having that measuring stick.
So it's important to know what your jab range is because that's always, or more often than not, the perfect time to throw a hook.
Yeah, so someone else's jab range is different than mine. But I know that my jab range, if someone's just outside my jab range, they're always right in my right hand reach in that range.
Of course.
They're always in kicking range. So it's kind of, you can kind of tell. Like my arms don't change from fight to fight. Whereas someone else is like, if I'm just outside their jab, that doesn't mean I can kick or I can do this or I can do that. That can be, kind of the variable a little bit. But my reach is always going to be the same.
So he blasts him with that shot, and then he pursues, and he pursues pretty hard. Iaquinta, kind of winging lefts and rights, flinging in every direction of Pearson. And I always wonder what the calculation is for a fighter and going in for the kill like that, because it isn't hard to think of examples of guys prematurely rushing in, thinking because a guy stumbles or drops to the ground that this is the time to go absolutely haywire and try to finish a guy, yet get caught with something, get taken down, have that moment snatched away, even fail to finish the fight in that position and done nothing but, exhaust yourself, right, by going that hard toward the end. Talk about the calculation in saying this is the moment in this fight where it's worth going to the wall and throwing as hard as I can, as frequently as I can, because I've got this guy.
It's always like a tough spot to try and figure out because you hurt someone like, so I'm always like a go for broke kind of guy, so I have a lot of finishes because when I hurt someone, it's like blood in the water. I get on people really, really fast, but it's dangerous sometimes. Sometimes you go too fast and you end up exhausting yourself. You don't quite finish the guy, it can be really, really tough. So you want to pressure people and you want to try to finish them, but you also don't want to expend too much energy. There has to be a time when you realize you hurt someone and you really try to pour it on, but if you're not getting them out of there right away, you got to kind of back it off a little bit and kind of regain your composure a little bit, because it's so easy to just use all of your energy trying to finish someone off, and then when it doesn't happen, now you're the you're the guy, you're now the prey. They're coming back at you. Because maybe you thought you hurt them, and maybe you did, but maybe they recovered, and then your subsequent shots weren't enough. We had a guy locally that fought last weekend, Devin Carrier, who he's been training with us for a while. Really good kid, really smart about stuff. Good kickboxing. He blasted his kid right off the bat, maybe the first 30 seconds of the first round. Amateur fight, three 3-minute rounds, and really hurt the kid. But I described the kid as a 155-pound Homer Simpson. He hit this kid with everything he could possibly land, and the kid just wasn't going out. You kicked him in the face, hit him with right hands, you hit him with hooks, hit him with great body kick, hit him with everything. The kid wasn't going anywhere. So we started screaming at Devin, pace yourself, because he was like a madman for a good 45 seconds, trying to kill this kid, and the kid just wasn't going anywhere. And Devin could have tried to keep hitting him, but he probably would have exhausted himself, and could have given the kid an opportunity to come back. So we got him to pace himself. He slowed down. He continued to pick apart on the kid. It looked like he was getting close to finishing him towards the end of the fight, but you kind of have to have that. You have to use your brain a little bit sometimes and think okay, this guy is not going anywhere right now. I need to protect myself a little bit. I need to keep composure. I need to pace myself. And and I think that Al did a great job. Al, since he hurt him, he jumped on him. I think Al could have kept going for a while, or he hurt Pearson so bad that he probably could have backed off and regained his composure and came with another flurry shortly after. But I love seeing guys that go for it. I think there's so many times when, especially when guys are champs, because they work so hard to get up there, and they don't want to lose. So when they hurt someone, sometimes they don't pour it on enough because they're trying to just okay, I hurt him, but I didn't lose anything. I can hurt him again. And a lot of times they have those five round fights, but 5 minute 5 round fights where they have a lot of time to hurt him again. It's sometimes just the opportunity doesn't come again, and that's why I think we see a lot of decisions.
It's very interesting, because you definitely do see that where guys get to the pinnacle of their division, they win a championship, they've got firepower. We've seen it on the rise. I think of Jose Aldo, for example. We see it on the rise where the kill shots in them. Same thing with Anderson, why people went absolutely ape about the Damian Maia fight and about the Patrick Cote fight and about the Tallest Latest fight, because we all know he can do it against absolute elite opponents, but he's not doing it. And perhaps part of that is, this idea that just because you nail somebody doesn't mean that you have to go as crazy to capitalize as you did on your way up the ranks. Now you're in a position where you're confident enough that you can pull that out of your bag of tricks, that it'll just happen again and again and again, because you've sort of downloaded information about your opponent such that you know when to throw that shot, and perhaps it isn't worth risking it all on a big flurry when you're the top dog, because that opportunity will come again.
Well, I think part of it too is that in the beginning, when you don't have the title, you're fighting to actually win fights. You're trying to you're working your way up. You're trying to it's not just this one guy you have to beat. You have to beat this guy, and you got to be impressive so people want to see you fight the champ. Whereas once you're the champ, everyone else has to impress to fight you. So a guy like Jose Aldo, he doesn't need to go out there and blast people out anymore. He needs to not lose. So I think that training camps end up changing a lot, where it's not so much guys trying to pull off these aggressive great fights as much as it's okay, I want to not lose. I want to not take damage. And I think that it's smart to not want to take damage, but you also have to be a little bit more aggressive. And I think it's like anything else, it's always a balancing act. When you're trying to get to fight the champ, you're trying to work your way up the rankings. You want to be exciting and you want to win. You have to win, but you want to be exciting too. Whereas when you're the champ, all you have to do is win. You don't have to be exciting. You have to keep that title as long as possible. You have to you want to stay the champ.
Now, if you ever were to win the UFC Lightweight Championship, do you think that you would change that about yourself? Would we see the killer instinct Joe Lauzon kind of fade a little bit just out of necessity?
I think I've been doing it so long, I don't think I could change it. Going back to I was like this back in grappling tournaments and things like that. It wasn't I wasn't trying to protect a UFC title or something, but I just don't know any other way to do it. Whether it's sparring or grappling tournaments or whatever. Like I've just always had that style. It would be really, really tough for me to fight any other way. Like I always try to have like. I always say I like to have exciting fights, but it's not me like in the moment of the fight being like, oh, it would be really exciting if I did this. I'm gonna go and do this. It's just it's stuff I do in the gym all the time. Like my last fight, I fought Mike Bisping. My favorite part of the whole fight was I caught his knee, I dumped him, and like I had him like kind of like he was basically on like one hand and like he was kind of upside down, and I like kneed him in the body, and that was like my favorite thing in the entire fight. Like I wasn't like I kneed him in the face and I cut him, and that was cool. But for me, like by far was when I kneed him in the body. When he was like basically upside down. I was like, I thought that was like really, really cool. I thought it was, I had a lot of fun, and that's something I've done in the gym a lot. Like I've dumped people and I've nailed them with knees, and like the big joke is like, oh, you'll never be able to hit that in a fight, and then I hit it. I was so happy.
To that point, we saw that exact instinct kick in from one Luke Rockhold, who defeated Michael Bisping in the main event Friday night in Sydney, and sealed the deal. I mean, he had Bisping in trouble off that head kick that, kind of to our point earlier about the nature of blocking a kick, seemed somewhat deflected, but landed at the proper angle and with enough torque, so to speak, that even though it appeared to flick off the side of Bisping's head, he hit the deck. Rockhold closes in, starts going to the body, starts attacking the head, and then bang, the guillotine opens up. I don't think people are going to credit, and rightfully so, Luke Rockhold for going to the kill, when that neck opens up. But Joe, I think you know as well as I do, if he failed on that guillotine, if somehow Michael Bisping had his wits about him enough to pop free and ended up working a top position for 3 minutes, everybody would be talking about how that was a horrible strategic move from Luke Rockhold.
Yeah, I think that was kind of like a little bit of Rockhold kind of putting the screws to him a little bit, because that was the first time Bisping had ever been submitted. So I think he really, I 100% believe that Rockhold could have finished him with a TKO if he wanted to. Like he could have kept punching, he would have got the finish. Bisping was hurt badly at that point. He had the cut was over his eye. He was already bleeding like right off the bat. I think he 100% could have. He chose at that moment. Okay, I want to submit him. I'm sure it was kind of something in the back of his mind, like all camp, like Bisping's never been submitted. I'm gonna try and submit him. And he rocked him, and he had the luxury of being able to choose how he was going to win, so he went for the submission. I think that was it, and talking about like the kick and all that stuff. So this is if I had ever fought in Japan against someone like say Anthony Pettis, and I had been maybe he came out as a southpaw when he doesn't normally, and maybe we weren't as ready for it or prepared as we should have been, and maybe if he used that rear kick, the power kick, and came really high, and maybe if I didn't block up and outside 90 the way I should, and instead reached much like Bisping did, maybe I would have been kicked in the face and knocked out, maybe. But I never fought in Japan; it never happened. But I definitely have a soft spot for that. I think it was a great example. Part of the reason why I want to talk about the Al fight and then the Bisping fight was I think Al did a great job at it. Al blocked up high like he should. He had his feet under him. He was perfectly ready to counter, and Pearson paid for it. On the other hand, Rockhold kicked to the body a lot, which I liked, with that power kick. Got Bisping reaching low and then clipped him. And it didn't seem like it was that big of a kick, but it was enough. And, and it hurt him really, really bad.
And so clearly the setup for that is a first frame largely characterized by Rockhold letting left kick after left kick after left kick to the body go. And that really is one of his true gifts in the cage. I mean, from Jacare to Kennedy, we've seen him use his ability to go to the body with kicks and cover distance with kicks to really trump card opponents that have really good offensive gifts that they can't get going against him because of how he's able to control the distance between his opponent and himself with those kicks. And I don't know, is it as elementary, Joe, as Rockhold goes to the body enough in the first round that Bisping's forced to bring his hands down and Bisping detects the moment to go upstairs and that's it?
I think it's a couple things. One, there's a big reach advantage. Rockhold had like a 5-inch reach advantage. So whenever they measure reach, they basically have someone put their arm straight out. They measure your middle finger, fingertip to fingertip, and that's your reach. Now, granted, like hand size can influence that and things like this, but basically, that generally, I think like knuckle to knuckle would be better, but whatever.
Yep.
But so if Rockhold has a 5-inch reach advantage, he has roughly 2.5 inches on each hand, on over Bisping. So when Bisping is at his perfect punching range, Rockhold is 2 inches deep. So Rockhold is at his punching range, Bisping is 2 inches short on each hand. So I think Rockhold did a great job. He stayed at distance. Pretty much the entire fight. Kicking range is longer than punching range. So he kept kicking to the body. He kept getting Bisping reaching. Rockhold's corner gave great advice in between rounds. They told him, relax and keep kicking to the body. And that's what he did. I really felt like Rockhold, he looked very comfortable, very relaxed the entire time. Bisping, on the other hand, looked very, very nervous. He was, and I love watching Bisping fight. But he was complaining to the ref about the headbutt, which was very valid. But he was complaining about that. Then he was complaining about something else. He just didn't look like he ever got comfortable the entire fight. Whereas Rockhold just looked calm, composed, knew he had the reach, knew he had the game plan. He was gonna, and I think was that a 5-round fight? Is that what it was? He had 25 minutes to kick Bisping in the body to set up the winning combination. So he was very relaxed, and every time he kicks that body, it's kind of wearing him down.
And interestingly, on the headbutt situation, Bisping, of course, came into this fight with a cut over his left eye, and it was detected in, pre-fight publicity photos and things like that, and it was the subject of a good amount of speculation on the web as to how it would affect the fight, and it totally affected the fight. It really seemed, Joe, to get in Bisping's head that cut had been opened up by the headbutt, and I think that's part of why he protested so much. If he didn't come into that fight with a cut, I'm not so sure he would consider that headbutt, even if it cut him, as big a deal. But when you come into a fight with a wound like that, it's very hard to shut it out of your mind. He was obsessed with the Vaseline on the cut. He was obsessed with all these little details that I don't know if they necessarily go towards the right frame of mind to win a fight against a high-level opponent.
It's really tough dealing with a cut or something like that. So for my last fight, fought Mike Chiesa, and I got a little cut under my eye. I got hit with a little tiny elbow, and this was maybe a month and a half, over a month out from the fight. And I wasn't worried about it because even if it opened up, it's under my eye. We hoped that it wouldn't open up. But it was under my eye. I wasn't going to get my vision. It was nothing they would ever stop the fight for, things like this. So I wasn't really worried about it. But you're still a little bit careful. You're a little cautious during camp because you don't want it to get worse. You don't want it to open up. You don't want a fresh cut, right before. Now, so Bisping was dealing with a fresh cut. It was right over his eye at a really bad spot. And he got fouled in, the worst possible way, right off the bat. So it's really, really tough. And it definitely affects your psychological state, your emotional state a little bit because... when I fought Jim Miller, I got a huge cut over my eye, on my forehead, and I was bleeding a lot, and I really felt like they would have stopped the fight if I didn't have such a positive attitude about it. They checked the cut, how do you feel? I'm like, no, I feel good. I'm like, I want to keep going. Let me keep going, and I think because I was so positive and I was so straightforward, oh no, I'm good. I want to keep going. I'm fine. I wasn't rocked. I was good. That they allowed me to keep fighting and keep going forward. I think there's other times when guys, maybe that they get cut and they're not as positive, not as uplifting about it, where they're they're pulling away from them, checking it, and they're acting like it hurts when they get touched. Then I think that fights get stopped. So I think that you have to you have to try and be positive about it, but that's on a fight that there's nothing you can do about it. That was a fresh cut. And there's nothing you can do about it. When you already have a cut, you're protecting that thing right off the bat. And then the second it gets cut, it's you're so worried about it. You're so mentally fatigued before it happens. Oh, please don't let this open. Please don't let this open. I have to protect this eye. And then it happens, and your world comes crashing down. And I think that I kind of think that that's what happened to Bisping a little bit. I think that no matter how much you try to talk it up, and I think it's not going to be a big deal. It's still in the back of your mind at least a little bit. Maybe it's not ruining your world, but you're definitely worried about it a little bit. And, I think that, everything just went Rockhold's way. He kept him at range. He was kicking in the body. The cut got opened up. I definitely don't think it was an intentional. It was clearly an accidental headbutt, but it still happened. It helped him out. The fact that, now Bisping is getting a little more worried about it. And, he's complaining to the ref. And as a fighter, if your opponent's complaining to the ref a lot, they're not in a very good mental state.
Right, you're giving a cue to your opponent, if nothing else. Maybe not even putting yourself in a perilous frame of mind, but giving a cue to your opponent, which obviously could be to your peril as well. Now, when Luke Rockhold sort of closes in with the front of his head, it struck me that we don't see that as often as you would think you would in MMA when guys try to close the distance and clinch up and lead with their head like that. A lot of times guys will use their head with, head-to-head grinding up against the fence to get correct positioning and to, correct their posture and keep their opponent on the defensive. But rarely do we see fighters bull in with their head. We see it an awful lot in boxing. But I feel like I don't see that often in the UFC. Is that a danger in there that you're accounting for when you're fighting, that when a guy looks to close up with you, his head's coming right for your eye?
No, it's not something that happens a lot. Like it's happened to me a couple times. Like I headbutted someone one time. I forget who it was. I don't know if it was Kyle Bradley or someone.
Intentionally, for sure.
Yeah,
Intentionally, right?
So it's just like, like when you're just close to distance, it's gonna happen. Like that's the number one reason for wearing headgear. Like when we do like a lot of sparring rounds. Obviously you want to wear headgear because it's gonna stop. Damage to your head and things like this from punches. But the other thing is just a clash of heads. It happens all the time. A lot of times I think now, like in the way the sport's been going lately, it's been more like kickboxing kind of matches. It's been more of a kickboxing match with some takedowns and some grappling and jiu-jitsu, but it's for the most part it's a lot more kickboxing match than anything. It's the takedowns where they happen a lot, and usually there's a good disparity in the two guys on that are doing the takedowns. If someone's a great wrestler and someone's maybe not such a good wrestler, you don't see about so much because the better wrestler takes them down so much. Or if you get two guys that are good wrestlers, they're kind of used to dealing with it. It doesn't happen as much either. So, but they happen a good amount. Like they happen in training camp all the time, like little accidental headbutts and things like this. So,
if you're a Southpaw fighter like Luke Rockhold, and you're coming in against an Orthodox striker like Michael Bisping, why is it such a rule of the sport? Why is it always so successful to kick the body over and over again as the Southpaw? It seems like the classical approach, if you have that Southpaw edge over a guy who's, stand-up oriented and is Orthodox, you constantly kick the body. Why is that such a successful formula as opposed to, the inverse? It doesn't seem like guys with Orthodox have a great advantage over guys coming out Southpaw.
Well, part of it is the liver side. Your liver's over on that side. So, for me as a righty, I have to protect that side because the Southpaw is going to come with their rear kick, which is their power kick, and then come right to the liver side, which is way worse. You get hit in that body on that side. So that's a big part of it. The other thing too is like just like any other lefty thing, you're not seeing all of that stuff as much. So like as a righty, I see lots of righties. Okay, and I hate dealing with lefties just because I don't see them as much. They're more rare. The same thing for a lefty though. Lefties, they don't mind righties, even though it's opposite. But they see it so much, it's not that big of a deal. But when a lefty sees another lefty, they hate it. It's like, it's almost like it's the unicorn. It's like, oh, I'm a lefty and I'm dealing with a lefty. It's like they don't like it either. Lefties hate other lefties as much as righties hate lefties. It's just because they're more rare. They're not as common. In MMA, it is more common because you get a lot of guys that wrestled, which I'm sure Rockhold, I don't know, but I would get bet that he's a righty, but he stands as a southpaw just because he wrestled so much. He wants to have his lead dominant hand. His dominant hand is his lead hand because that's how a lot of wrestlers do it. That's why a lot of wrestlers start right foot forward. That's why you see so many lefties in our sport as opposed to boxing.
Yeah, it's a great point in terms of how often you get to see it, and it must be very intimidating and unsettling to see a stance that you really haven't had the chance to see in a great amount in camp, right there in the cage, live fight scenario. Got to figure it out as you go. And then the other guy, who's much more accustomed to seeing Orthodox guys in sparring, it's like nothing. He's just muscle memory all day. He doesn't have to account for this difference.
It's definitely tough, and part of it too is that, just because I'm a righty and I see mostly righties, so I can adjust to most righty styles because I've seen them so much. It's been such like a big part of like training like forever. Whereas with lefties, like a lot of times you have to kind of get used to that particular. You get used to lefty in general. Adjusting to lefty is the first thing, but more importantly, is about getting used to that particular lefty style. You gotta get used to their reach. You get used to how they move around. So I was supposed to fight Diego Sanchez, who's a lefty. And he's different than every other lefty I fought. So it's not only I have to get used to lefties, I got to get used to that particular lefty too. It's just you don't see it as much, so it takes a little more of an adjustment.
Now, let me ask you about the closing sequence in Rockhold versus Bisping, in which, after he's dropped with the head kick, Rockhold goes straight to the guillotine, or not straight to the guillotine. He toys around, I think, with trying to finish him with shots to the body, or maybe that was just designed to open up the neck. But anyway, he finds the opportunity, he latches on, and in transition, he ends up in mount, and he ends up in a unique position for a guillotine in that his hands aren't interlocked, but he only has one hand, and he's using kind of his torso to create the pressure on the other side, kind of arching his body backward, which is kind of a stylish and unique way of finishing a guillotine. I wonder, is that lower percentage to only have one arm locked around the neck and line your body, or is that higher percentage because you can exert that much more force?
That comes down to whatever Rockhold is comfortable with. There could be something that he did wrestling-wise or just in training wise where he's like very, very comfortable finishing a certain way. One of the things I always talk about is how I think that I personally think I personally do a lot of like kind of what most people consider lower percentage moves, but I've been doing them for so long and I have so many reps on them that they're very high percentage for me. And part of that is because so I've done a lot of reps, but the other end is that other people have not seen them as much, and they have not seen people that are as good at them as I am. So it's a little different. Like if you talk about your straight up like arm lock from guard, triangle from guard, there's like a couple like really basic setups that are like most people would say, oh, this is like a really high percentage move. Like this is like a really really good one. And again, someone that hasn't been drilling that for years and years and years, it's probably a good move. You probably hit it every single time you ever want. But now you're dealing with guys that are training against the defense to that particular move all the time. It's like, okay, so maybe your output is here, but their defense is here. There's like very, very little space there. But maybe, my attack on like a lower quality move, a lower percentage move is here, but they've never seen it, so it's way down here. So there's a bigger disposition there. So, I don't know. I think that, I'm all about kind of doing like the unique kind of quirky stuff and just doing it really, really well and understanding how to recover if it doesn't go well. I'm sure that, Rockhold took a chance there. But I'm sure that if it wasn't working out his way, he would have understood right away, and he would have adapted, and he would have adjusted, and he wouldn't have come out all that bad. I don't think he would have gone into that if he had never had any way to recover from there.
But tell me about the difference between a guillotine from the posture that Rockhold hit it with sort of one arm. A lot of people called it a one-arm guillotine.
Yep.
Certainly only has one arm wrapped around his neck, but it struck me that what his right arm is doing and posting is very important too. He's using two arms to execute. The posture of that type of guillotine versus the one we're more accustomed to, where both arms are kind of interlocked right underneath the neck. What's the difference in pulling?
So the big thing is on a two-arm guillotine, right? I'm around the head, and then I grab onto my wrist and I lift up, and that's what I rely on this hand pulling on my other hand to kind of close it up and get the space, and I try and dip and all this other stuff. What Rockhold did is he wraps around, but then you rely on you basically make like a sandwich out of your chest, your hand, and their chest. So you get a good grip, and then everything gets sandwiched, and it's pinned. Your own hand is pinned between your chest and their chest, and then you're able to use the ground, and you can lift and do whatever else you want to do. I do it from guard a lot, where I like to come here, I get like that hand sandwich kind of guillotine, and then I take my other arm and I come over the top of their shoulder, because it just keeps their arm out of my face, and I can finish it off pretty easily. And it's a brutally tight. It's so tough. They can't even, like, when I come here, people are used to seeing this when I do like the normal guillotine. So people are used to seeing it. They know all the defenses. They know how to grab my wrist. They know how to pry and do all that sort of stuff. When I come here and I make like that hand sandwich, they can't, like, everything's so tight. They can't even grab onto my hand. They can't do anything. So it's really, really tough to deal with. And it's just, again, it's something that they're not as used to. So that they don't have thousands and thousands of reps defending this guillotine, the hand sandwich guillotine, like they would a regular guillotine.
You heard it here first. Hashtag hand sandwich next time that happens in the cage.
Hand sandwich guillotine.
Never heard of that.
Yeah.
Makes me hungry, I'll tell you that. So, fascinating insight, and that's kind of part of the stylish nature of Luke Rockhold's finish, is that he's so comfortable in his grappling. And, of course, he came to the game as much more of a grappling-oriented fighter, as really a tournament jiu-jitsu player who leveraged his kind of natural size very well in that arena and sort of developed into a kickboxer from there. We think about him, I think, as perhaps just a bit more kickboxer than grappler in terms of how he ended up becoming as a UFC fighter and as a mixed martial artist. But I think, originally that's his base. When he digs into his reservoir, those types of stylish, rarely seen angles on submissions is really what he can call upon to surprise opponents. And the surprise factor is half the game, it sounds like sometimes, especially when you're going for a submission, because everybody's seen everything by this point. It's just, have they seen that type of approach on a hold?
And I think the other thing, too, is I think that in particular, Bisping has kind of struggled against wrestlers. He fought Tim Kennedy. He fought Chael Sonnen. He fought Dan Henderson. He traditionally has struggled against wrestlers. I think that's a lot of UK guys. I think that the wrestling over there isn't as big as it is over here. So we have a lot of really stud, awesome wrestlers. In the United States, NCAA and all that sort of stuff. Like, when was the last time you ever heard of a good European wrestler? It just doesn't happen as much. And
well, as far as Britain, certainly Scandinavian countries,
absolutely,
solid wrestlers. Of course, right. That's kind of the reason I know that's true is because you'll never hear a British fighter argue that.
Yeah,
they would be the ones to push back, and they really don't, at the idea that wrestling is not a very mature martial art in their country.
I know. So Jimmy Quinlan is my wrestling and jiu-jitsu coach, and so I have him all the time. It's awesome. And I know, like, he went out to train with Luke Barnett. Luke brought him out and helped him work on the wrestling and things like that. And there's no one out there. There's no good. There's not even like good drilling partners or anything like that. It's just the wrestling is just there's such a different level over there, compared to over here. So
a lot of people are talking about this kind of, the future is now matchup between Chris Weidman and Luke Rockhold. Weidman represents kind of a new wave of strategic fighting and tactics. I mean, the Lyoto Machida fight was really, to me at least, one of the most impressive performances of any champion in UFC history because of the way he was able to make mid-fight adjustments against a fighter who nobody does that against. I mean, you either come in with the right approach to beat Machida or you don't. You don't figure it out midstream. Chris Weidman did it like it was like normal. Luke Rockhold has that gift as well, though. And I remember prior to either of them capturing championships, when Rockhold won the Strikeforce middleweight title, and before we realized Weidman was going to be the champ, a lot of talk about how complementary their styles were and how interesting it would be to see them try to figure each other out in the cage. I got to ask you, have you seen anything about Luke Rockhold's style that presents a unique challenge to the current middleweight champion?
I mean, like you already said, like the body kicks. I think it's tough to deal with because it's one of those shots where like sometimes you don't see it coming as quickly as you would like. And it definitely it adds up. It's not a knockout shot, but it's a keep wearing you down shot, and it just makes everything you do a little bit duller, a little bit slower, a little bit weaker. It's kind of tough to deal with sometimes. So, but I'm a huge Chris Weidman fan. I love to watch that guy every single time. Great wrestler, great jiu-jitsu, great stand up. Just taking people out left and right. He's also huge for the weight class. He's a big boy. So, I think Weidman would do well. But I want to see Weidman fight everyone. Like anyone, I think that I'm interested to see how they do what they try to do against Chris. But I think Chris has a great camp, a great team behind him. Ray Longo, Matt Serra, the whole deal. So I'm really looking forward to seeing that fight.
So we spent time talking about Iaquinta's victory over Ross Pearson via second round TKO stoppage, and Luke Rockhold's stoppage victory Friday night in Sydney over Michael Bisping via second round submission. So finally, Joe, takeaway points. What are the most important things we should remember about Iaquinta and Luke Rockhold's victories when we look at their next fights and try to identify what it is they do well?
For Al, it's all about he's got great footwork. He moves his head well. He's always ready to counter. And he's quick. He mixes in just enough stuff. He kicks. He throws elbows. He throws knees. Always really exciting. And for Rockhold, to pay attention to that left kick. Pay attention to how he uses his reach, long reach, and use that body kick, and they complement each other. And then his wrestling just makes it it's like a hat trick. He gets all three.
Joe, it was a blast. Hopefully, folks have a richer sense of what went down Friday night in the Octagon by someone who's seen every type of fight and every type of opponent, every type of triumph and adversity in mixed martial arts. It was a pleasure to look at these fights with you, and a lot more to come here.
And we'll see you guys next week. I don't even know what's going on next week, but we'll try and bang out another one of these next week if you guys do.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for joining us.